All right, I say again, welcome RELC members, first time attendees, and so on and so forth. I'm so glad to see so many of you showed up for this and decided to engage and maybe even at points challenge yourself in revisiting the thoughts we might have about one of the most dynamic Americans to ever exist, someone who took this country forward and by extension, visited peril upon his life in the process. Someone I'm grateful to have gotten to know from afar. Did not exist at the same time as him and do not exist at the same time that he existed. So just grateful to be able to engage him historically and intellectually. So I will make this as inclusive as possible. I will ask if you are okay with unmiking and sharing your thoughts based on this exercise. Please raise your hand so that I can know that I will get around to you. If you are unable to unmic, but you do want to share your thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat. This was a participatory sport today, so I'm looking for people to actually engage and have some exchange. Don, you stay safe driving. If you have an opportunity and you want to unmic, please do. But we have embraced multitasking. I want to say hello to some wonderful folks that I recognize from RELC membership, RELC presenters. Ricky, good to see you. Glad to see you this past Saturday or Sunday at that event up at St. Francis. Rob, good to see you, man. Been too long. We will have a leadership council meeting here very soon, so I look forward to engaging with you all. Demetrius, glad you can make it, man. Really appreciate what you did last year in your presentation. Vanessa, Romalita, awesome. Look forward to what you're going to do for us in the future. Don, of course, good to see you. Some people from the Historic Commission on which I serve. William, thanks for raising your hand. I'm glad that you're willing to participate. I need to see some more hands out there. Bishop Greg, I appreciate you reaching out and making a connection with you as well, and I'm glad you could make it today. Paul, someone that's going to be on deck as well. Look forward to interacting with you in the not too distant future in this same space. And of course, Dr. Parker had an event last night in Medmond that I was glad to be able to make and hear some expressions that should reverberate in what we talk about today with Dr. King in terms of the Black American family. That's what Dr. Parker was talking about last night in Medmond. So look, this is what we're here for, to have discussion and talk and chat. And I could feel this space because I can talk all day. But again, I want to hear from you guys. So if you have performed the exercises was sent and intended to do, and you have some things that you want to share and put on the table, I would like, if you know how, raise your hand so I can come to you and kind of hear your thoughts on the matter. I will begin with some minor comments about the King that I know, and what I think most of us will probably agree on as far as things we acknowledge via some of the materials I shared. Leader, absolute leader. Something I think we lack today on many levels, but especially in regards of Black American plight, or in the terms that he would have used, the plight of the American Negro. So leader jumps to the top of my list before and after engaging. Intellectual, strategizer, strategist, that's the right word, strategist comes to mind. Simplistic complexities, matters that people are wrangling and struggling with and trying to figure out. He's matter of fact, and he's got receipts, as they say, to carry forth what he's really what he's tasked with, what he's admittedly tasked with, which is justice and better treatment for the least of us. But he's specific as well, and specificity is at the core of my research, and it's there, but we have participated in the overlooking of it in a way that I hope we touch on a little bit as we have this conversation. So since I only still see one hand, I'm gonna guess some of you just don't know how to raise your hands. So I'm going to start with William, who's under the ADOS moniker, and get his comments and thoughts. Paul, I think you are on mic, so I'm going to guess you have something to say as well. So I'll start with William, and we'll make our way around the space. Go ahead, William.
Hey, I'm glad to be here today with everyone. My name is William Dickens. I'm part of the ADOS Advocacy Foundation, ADOS standing for American Descendant of Slavery. And King is who really birthed this ADOS movement. So, in the great words of King, King spoke about a Pacific harm being done to a Pacific group of people. In return for a Pacific harm done to a group of people, you have to have a Pacific justice for that group of people. And the thing I say about justice is a lot of people don't. It's an action word, but a lot of people don't want to do the hard work when it comes to justice. And and I think one thing I'm sure like just got brought up. In this conversation today, we'll have a conversation, and when Felton say the Negro. King said we are the descendants of slaves. So in 2025, when people try to clump a group of people together with other groups by using terms like people of color, it's an eraser of that Pacific group that King was saying that was the descendants of slaves. So I hope today that someone can walk away from this meeting understanding that you shouldn't erase a group of people and that Pacific harm that was done to that group of people by grouping another group of people with them, because that's like an injustice act instead of a just act.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, William. Yeah, that's part of what I think we should be getting to and touching on, because one of my questions to the group at some point during this conversation would be, who was he speaking about? There is a specificity that has to be acknowledged. And in that letter from a Birmingham Jail, which I hope to unpack some as well, there are comments that need our eyes for a second, third, or sometimes people have read that letter multiple times, so maybe a 15th glance to understand the weight of what he was unpacking from that cell. But specificity is rampant throughout. And that specificity is not with a disregard to other groups. It's with total regard to everyone's humanity. And we just somehow, some way, in his case, he was talking about wait. You have to wait. WAIT, wait. You have to wait. The Negro has to wait. But I think some of that weight has been complemented, not necessarily replaced, but some of that weight has been complemented by whataboutism. So if there's a direct address for a certain group that needs this attention, that will actually be for the collective of us all, for our betterment, there's a weight and a whataboutism that is now complemented. There's what about this other group and what about that other group, and that there's no disregard for anyone, but there has been a willful ignoring of the people he's speaking about in everything that I sent you that were at the core of his motivations. Paul, I'm coming to you next. If you had something to say, I do have Demetrius on the hook as well. And Romalita just raised her hand. Thank you. So Paul, Demetrius, and then I'll come to you, Romalita.
Felton, I don't have anything particular to say, but I've never let that stop me. The thing that the foremost thing that I have been impressed with over my life by Martin Luther King is really summed up in his speech soon before he was killed, where he said, "I have seen the promised land, and I might not get there with you," because he knew he was in the crosshairs, and he went forward anyway. And we have a tradition, a European Christian tradition of martyrs. And I don't want to get religious on you, because I'm not a religious person, and that would be kind of a false note. But one of the through lines of the Catholic martyrdom tradition is the person knowingly going to their death. And I think, I don't know that Martin Luther King knew what was about to happen to him, but he knew that it could. He absolutely knew that. And so that is just, that's always just stuck with me, more so than the specifics of his philosophy and what he's talking about, the specificity. That's all. That's all.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there has to be a strong adherence to a system of belief that may amaze us all, that you're willing to jeopardize not just your life, but the comfort and the ability for your loved ones to process why your principles so skew that way. There's a lot that I think he sacrificed. Peace of mind being just a small piece of that puzzle. But yeah, to your point, he knew he was in the crosshairs, so to speak. Demetrius, I'm coming to you next.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I got real excited about this one, man. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. And so you know, my folks are all Atlanta University students. I went to Clark Atlanta. Folks in my family went to Morehouse. My parents went to Morris Brown. My dad played basketball at Morris Brown. Mom and dad both went there. Aunts and uncles were all products of either Clark, Clark College or Atlanta University, which became Clark Atlanta in 1988. So, you know, that's, I grew up across the street from Ralph David Abernathy, which was Martin Luther King's best friend. His son, Ralph Jr., and my parents were friends. Ralph counseled my parents before they got married, was supposed to marry him, but ended up being called by King to head out of town before the wedding happened. So wasn't able to do that. But, Juanita Abernathy, his wife, would call over and ask for sugar. I mean, we grew up in a neighborhood, which is Collier Heights in Atlanta, was full of civil rights folks. So my proximity to King was pretty close. Driving by Ebenezer to go to Clark Atlanta, which is in West End, which is where he preached. The King house is right down the street. Just, his impact on my life and my family directly has made a huge difference in my life. And so I've been listening to a lot of his sermons, speeches. There's an app out there that you can kind of pull them up on and just kind of listen. To me, the really significant one was the one in Memphis right before he was murdered. Right, he went there to speak to the sanitation workers about pay and just how they were not being cared for and taken care of. And so, yeah, this was exciting to me because I love to hear other people talk about this man that I consider really a cornerstone to this country, not just to Black people, but I think what he did for America changed the trajectory of where the country was heading and where it is now. So that's my comment for now. I just wanted to just say that this is exciting for me.
Oh man, greatly appreciate you sharing, and I'm sure that proximity played a significant role in shaping how you view the world and what you feel like your position in it could be. You said something that I think will prompt me to share this first quote, and then I'll go to Romalita, and then I will go to Rob. But I'm going to share a quote from his 1963 "I Have a Dream" speech that I think speaks to what Demetrius just mentioned in terms of what he contributed to our progress. And there's a reality that we still have so much further to go that he touches on those 4 or 5 years later when he did that last interview that I sent you from the church with NBC. But this quote comes from the speech in DC, and he says, "It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning." At this point, I would say that, some of that progress has been intentionally retarded and brought to a screeching halt or reconfigured in symbolic ways that actually take away from the momentum that he knew was being had that day in Washington, D.C. So I just wanted to put that out there. Demetrius, I definitely appreciate that comment. Romelita?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Romelita, and you asked us to take a look at what we know about him from memory. I know quite a bit about Dr. King, having spent in divinity school about 18 weeks studying his life. And one of the things that stands out to me is his desire to continue working for the beloved community. And also, I remember in 2020 when all of the racial unrest kind of started to just unfold more and more, from Trayvon all the way up to George Floyd and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland, and just how sad I started to feel. And during those 18 weeks when I was studying his life, he helped me so much. Reading his words helped to ground me. And even though he was experiencing all of these things, he was still committed to the work. And there was this one particular sermon I remember that he gave at Mount Pisgah Church in '67. And I would listen to this speech before 2020 when I was sad. And he said that I have to confess that I'm weak and I'm losing courage. And sometimes I feel discouraged. Living every day under the threat of death, I feel discouraged. Living under extensive criticism, even from Negroes, I feel discouraged. I feel my work is in vain. And just the weight of that, of being just a human being, and the weight of the world on your shoulders, but going on anyway. And he says, you know, there is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. And I have taken great inspiration from his life, that here this ordinary human being, this ordinary man, saying that I feel weak, I feel discouraged. He's got all of these awards. Everybody looks to him, and even he felt discouraged and sad. And I feel that way oftentimes in our country now. And then I go back to his words and just immerse myself in becoming courage. So he has been a great source of inspiration for me, his life. Not so much that he was perfect, but he was willing to do the work. And so it inspires me to keep going, because if he could do it under such insurmountable odds, surely I can. Thank you.
Well said. Yes. I think it is an inherent quality of a leader to cause a profound desire to do something, even if you're not them, and not to replicate them or to place them on some pedestal that they can never be removed from, not to turn them into some type of icon, but to be motivated by them in whatever direction you see purpose. So I definitely appreciate that share. I'm going to read a portion of the Birmingham letter before I come to you, Rob, because Romelita spoke to something, and it was his honesty in dealing with the things that he had to deal with as a human being who was fixated on justice. This section starts with I started thinking about the fact that I stand in the middle of two opposing forces in the Negro community. One is a force of complacency made up of Negroes who, as a result of long years of oppression, have been so completely drained of self-respect and of a sense of somebodyness that they have adjusted to segregation. And on the other hand, of a few Negroes in the middle class who, because of a degree of academic or economic security, and because at points they profit by segregation, have unconsciously become insensitive to the problems of the masses. The other force is one of bitterness and hatred, and comes perilously close to advocating violence. What he's doing in that section, of course, I like context, but I can't read you everything. I think is actually acknowledging not just how frustrated he is, but how frustrated, disillusioned, and at some points disconnected the people he desires to uplift are as well. And there's something to be said of exercised empathy, contemplative empathy. And I think he did that in an undeniably beautiful and accessible way. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Felton. So, yeah, so you asked our initial impressions, what we remember from MLK Jr. I got to tell you, I was 9 years old, lived in Northern Virginia, inside the Beltway, when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and they had the riots in Washington, D.C. I know there were riots spread out, but we were right there. My dad he was in the military, and he had to go downtown to work, and there were all these riots and all that. And that was really my first exposure to anything like this. And I remember I was going to a Catholic elementary school at the time as well. And I kind of vaguely remember in school there was talks about equality, and there's really shouldn't be differences in color. I don't know if it was because of those riots and what had happened, or they would have done it anyway. I really don't know. But I just remember those riots and the fear in people, and I assume it was mostly a fear in white people. And my parents were kind of open about it in talking about it, that that Martin Luther King Jr. was a good person. He was talking about equality, which was a good thing, and nonviolence, which is a good thing. And that was kind of my first exposure to this whole thing. And then going into old Washington Senators baseball games at RFK, and driving into town. They didn't take a bus or subway or anything; just drove to the ballpark, and seeing some neighborhoods off to the side of the highway, whatever. I've never seen anything like that. What they refer to as the slums and the ghettos, right? And I don't know. I remember that. I don't remember a whole lot about my childhood, but I remember some of that stuff. So I guess it did make an impression. I watched the 3 videos, and sorry, I didn't read the letter. I don't know if I've ever read it or not. But I was kind of some things that I picked up on that I was not aware of, was his insistence that everything that he was promoting and doing was good for the nation. Not just that it was good for blacks, it was good for the nation. And I didn't realize he spoke that eloquently about that. And of course the nonviolence, and how his strength of how strong he was about the nonviolent aspect of the protest and everything. And I was kind of struck about some of the interviewers asking him, tying it into things like, are you communist? Do you have communists in there? Trying to degrade his effort. A question: does a Negro know what he wants to be? I mean, just I guess the mentality of that. And these are the people in the press, right? Names I've heard of, and having to deal with those kinds of things, which I was not really aware of. He talked about in one of the videos, actually, I think he was asked a question about Southern Negroes versus Northern Negroes and the differences that were being faced, and maybe the Southern Negroes had it after the Civil Rights Act, things were a little bit better for them, but weren't any better for the Northern folks. So that was all news to me as well. I'd like to understand a little bit more about that. I remember reading before those videos on the news of I think it was bull connors and the fire hoses and the dogs going against the young people, children, teenagers, young adults, whatever. And that was like the first time anybody had seen it on the news, recordings of that kind of violence that was going on. And the white population aboard that, it was horrible. They didn't realize it was like that. that kind of stuff was going on. And so that was that really helped out the civil rights movement in trying to stop that violence. But then Dr. King started talking about, well, you weren't committed to the hard work, which is still true today, I think. Yeah, you fought against those big, obvious injustices that were going on, but then just everything just sort of faded off, which I think is still happening today. Yeah, and his idea about the blacks being depersonalized, used as a thing, and so our attitude in society, thinking of black people as things rather than people, I think has still become pervasive somehow in thinking. And yeah, I'm glad he pointed that out. I hadn't thought about that. But anyway, that's my impressions of everything. Thanks.
No, hey man, grateful for you sharing. Yes, I opened a paper I wrote on Black masculinity and via the gaze of women during era right after slavery, and I opened that paper when I presented it with a quote from MLK from a book that I'll recommend to you, Rob, since you're curious about more. His last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. It's a wonderful read, very salient. But I opened that paper with a quote about the thingification of Black people. When you thingify people, you do disallow for compassion and empathy and care to be normalized. You problematize it because you've turned them into a thing. Even absent slavery, even after they're not commodities anymore, you still personify them as a thing. So it makes them almost unrelatable. That persists. Agreed.
Yeah, okay. I have to say one more thing.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
That I think our history ought to point out a little bit more. During the Civil War is when the Western lands were opened up. And Dr. King referred to this in one of his interviews there. And they had the great land rush. You heard, the Oklahoma Sooners and, people lining up and waiting for the whistle to blow and go out and claim their land. That all happened during the Civil War. And people were enslaved and they had zero opportunity for that. And that was one of the, 3 or 4 really huge things that built up, I don't want to say the middle class, but gave people opportunity, right? That were afforded to white folks, that weren't afforded to black folks. And
yeah, speaking about the European immigrant being undergirded and by a tidal wave of support and acceptance and economic base that sets them up for success generationally. Another book, if you're interested, W.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. There was a brief moment in the sun had by this formerly enslaved people, only to be turned back towards slavery with black codes and Jim Crow, et cetera, and being excluded from the process, which you mentioned. You had a fully efficient, well-trained, if not already had innate skills based on the prolonged servitude of being slaves, but well authoritized workforce that was discarded, that was not allowed to provide themselves with a clear-cut opportunity by being embraced by this country as Reconstruction was supposed to have done. But no, and some of the things you mentioned that I thought were very critical to be unpacked, especially during this highly polarized political climate that we inhabit. One of those clips, the one that you mentioned, Rob, that had him talking about his political awareness and the fact that he was not adherent or so loyal to one party that he could not have thoughts about which one held his best interests and which one would profess that for him to be potentially persuaded by. He was not beholden to anyone or anything except justice, fairness, and the things that this country said it was about at its inception. So I thought that was really worth sharing in this climate And you know, there was efforts to try to put a little dirt into the elements of what he was fighting for with accusations of communism, et cetera, et cetera. None of that could stick. He was very well prepared, and his work was authentic and genuine and not based on any thing that was nefarious. So all of that came across in that interview, and I think any gotcha moments they were hoping for just didn't materialize. He was there in a great way. William, I'm going to read another section of Letter from Birmingham Jail, then I'll come to you. If anybody else has the desire to add to the conversation, okay, Paul, I'll come to you after I get William. Give me 1 second. I want to add more via this this quote I'll read that I think makes sense after some of what Rob shared. I must make 2 honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been greatly disappointed in the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, quote, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, unquote, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. So, Rob, I think that fits what you shared based on the fact that, you know, you witnessed a reaction to this man's death, and he's actually kind of, you know, forewarning us of what's possible if we play in the middle for too long. If we have criticisms for people who are simply seeking justice. I see some hands, and I'm glad to see them, and I get to talk less now because I get to hear from you guys. I really am here for all of that, so I'm grateful that, again, have these participants. So I'm going to come to you first, William, and then I'm going to go to Paul and then Brittany. William?
I just want that's what I say. Like what you just read is basically King saying, it's like people want to say I be nice to the Negro and I don't disrespect them, but that don't help us eat at night, and that don't help us economically. When you talk about even in the faith aspect of our justice, one of the biggest hurdles we stand against is like the white Christian church. They don't support reparation for us, and reparation is a reparative justice. So we look at this and we started dig into it. You like, are you for justice or not? Or do justice not accommodate to the descendants of slaves? And when we think about being oppressed for as long as we have been oppressed in America. And when I think about when the lady was talking about King in that moment, how he was feeling so overwhelmed. Well, at the height of King's fight for justice, he was the most hated man in America, not just among white people, but the Negro too. So what we're looking at when you're talking about a long history of oppression, the descendant of slavery not only faces critiques from from whites, we face it from our own group. So when I see people, when I sit in a meeting the other day and I heard a man make a statement, and the statement came from an African American male. He said African American males are lazy. That's how powerful social engineering is and oppression is. That's why our justice claim is so humongous, for people to really look at this thing and say, what have we done here? And what can we do to undo it in a real way?
Oh man, beautifully said. Yeah, the exploitation is rampant, and it affects us all. There's a conditioning that takes place in how one is viewed or these people are viewed. And again, the whataboutism, the weight has become whataboutism. So there's a lot that I think we are tasked with actually addressing, that we need to make a priority. Paul.
This is kind of a little bit of a change of subject. But it seems to me that Dr. King, throughout his example, he lived something which he said in his I Have a Dream speech, but and I don't know if I got that from him, but it's something that I've felt very strongly. He says, I have a dream, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. And I think that we understand that at that time, when we talk about sons, he meant sons and daughters. We just didn't have to, you didn't have to be explicit about that back then, when language changes. But he didn't just say that. He really appealed to people like me who had ancestors who owned slaves, who did not treat them very well. We have documentary evidence of that. He talked about justice, but he was talking about brotherhood, and he was including everybody. And he, because of who he was, and not just that he said this one time, but that he lived it, that door has always been open to people who feel their white identity stronger. And I've never thought that I was one of those people, but maybe I am. I don't know. We all have a feeling of who we are, our identity, and white people have to do to figure out what their identity is kind of confusing sometimes. But if your ancestors fought in the Civil War on the side of the South, or they owned slaves, you might feel, well, he's not talking to me, but he is, and he still is, and I feel that very strongly from Dr. King. That's all.
Yeah. He was an equal opportunity encourager of recognition of humanity. I'm something I say often that everybody on this call has probably heard me say. I am a proponent of us wrestling with our shared humanity above all else, and I think that was paramount in everything he was communicating. Just gets tougher and tougher as we commit to ideas around identity politics when we haven't fixed the root. The root is important in this equation. Dr. Parker, coming to you first. I know you just had an event that centered this topic of conversation in a different way. And what I think of you as a scholar and as family at this point. I hold you in that high regard. So I'm glad you're able to be here, and I'm looking forward to what you have to say.
Great, thank you, Felton. Much of what I have to say about Dr. King actually goes back to the fact that I was 15 years old when he was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. And at that time, I had this love-hate relationship with Dr. King. You have to understand that in 1968, there were some of us who were politically astute. We understood that there was more than a civil rights movement. We were caught up in the Black Power movement. And King did not sit very well with many of us. I came to love Dr. King in death. Because surely when he was alive, it was mixed. We were going back and forth between Malcolm X, the philosophies of Malcolm X, Black Panther Party, Pete Newton, Stokely Carmichael. And for a lot of us, it was very difficult to embrace the philosophies of a Dr. King. And so there were times when we went to jail for different reasons. We were doing some things that King probably would not have approved. But I remember his 1968 speech, the April 3rd speech that Paul made reference to when he spoke about the mountaintop. That resonates with me right down to the present time. And by 1971, 72, surely by the mid-1970s, I could think of no other historical figure that impressed me or who impressed me like Dr. King. I mean, he was right up there with Frederick Douglass, W.B. Du Bois. As I began to read his works, as I began to really listen to his speeches, as I read his speeches and listen to them, as early as just a month ago, what he said 50 years, 60 years ago is so relevant today. I mean, it's just so amazing that in 2025, we have devolved rather than evolve into a place where he thought we should be by this time. We are right back where he was in 1968, in 1967, 1965, in 1963, when he made his famous I Have a Dream speech. So as I look at him today, I appreciate and love his philosophies. I always said, by the time I got to graduate school, I said, man, I wish I could have had a writing course with Dr. King. If I could have just sat with him and he taught us a speech class, a writing class, because that's who he was. And the fact that the man was 39 years of age when he was assassinated. I mean, the impact that he had not only on the United States, but he was a national son and a son of the world, without a doubt. And so, I come to appreciate him. It's not like hero worship. It's just that you love the man for his vision, for his philosophies, for being so many decades ahead of most other people. And I'm happy now as I look back on it that I was able to at least share some space and time with Dr. King until his death in 1968.
Man, that's a beautiful assessment and a vulnerable one. Much like we know, but we don't often say, he was not the most popular figure on any side of the street. And if you look and you ask now, most people, that everybody was a civil rights activist and everybody sat at the counter, and no white person was pushing or fighting or fussing or sicking dogs on anybody. Everybody just is whoever they think they are in this revisionist mindset that we possess. But I appreciate your honesty in expressing that. Yes, going through different layers of Black American life, you come to these conclusions that you were more like this person who was more militant and radical and overt. Robert F. Williams comes to mind. But when you, as you stated, get into the weeds of who Dr. King was, man, it's undeniable. This man was top tier. Tango, I'm coming to you. I'm going to read what is a mouthful of his letter from Birmingham Jail. Intentionally, I believe there are no punctuation marks. It's just this long sentence that I think is meant to be a bit exhausting, and to kind of give people an idea. If you read this sentence, this long take of what Black American life is like. I'm going to read this and then I'm coming right to you, Tango. So please bear with me, guys. It's a bit of much, but I'm going to do it. I guess it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, brutalize, and even kill your Black brothers and sisters with impunity, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she cannot go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her little eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see the depressing clouds of inferiority begin to form in her little mental sky, and see her begin to distort her little personality by unconsciously developing a bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son asking in agonizing pathos, Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you, when you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored, when your first name becomes nigger and your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and when your wife and mother are never given the respected title Miss, when you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly at tiptoe stance, never knowing what to expect next, and plagued with inner fears and outer resentments, when you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into an abyss of injustice where they experience the bleakness of corroding despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate, unavoidable impatience. So much that this man was capable of articulating that is impressive. And with an overarching tone of respect and understanding that he's talking to another human being. So Tango, I know you had your hand up. I'm coming to you next, and Paul, I'll come to you after. I'll
Quick
come
comment
to
just
you
on
after
what you
Tango,
just
Paul.
said.
Yeah, I'll come back to you after. Gotcha.
Then forget it. It'll be passed.
It won't, unless you want it to be. Go ahead, Tango.
I wanted to follow up about that time. So first of all, I love the way Dr. King opens the letter. When he says, seldom, if ever, do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. And that's not said in arrogance. That's said in an urgency, because time is of the essence, because his life will be short, because he's urgent for justice, and he has this deep rooted conviction that doesn't allow for distractions. So I absolutely loved how he started. And then to your point about Tom Felton, on page 4 of the letter, there's a white Christian man that he refers to as my white brother, who sends him a letter and says basically, all Christians know that colored people receive equal rights eventually. And he answers that, he says that there's a tragic misconception of time, that time is neutral, and that it can either be used destructively or constructively. And I'm reading now. I'm coming to feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than people of goodwill. And I just think that that's still kind of the sense and where we are now. Like, when does this become a priority? In my death? Like, just, so I think that we really have to give true, like this is just as urgent right now. I think Dr. Parker was just saying this is just as urgent today as the day he wrote it.
No doubt about it. Yeah, and I have that same section highlighted as well. But I think you did an awesome job of sharing that out. Brittany, you had something you wanted to add? If you're talking, you're muted, Brittany.
I sure was talking, but I like to piggyback a little bit on what Tango just said about the sense of urgency, because I don't want to get off course, but when I look at whoever our Black leadership is today, I'm looking for them still, but like our Black quote unquote heads, or the people in office who happen to be Black. I'm not going to say they're my leaders necessarily, but I do wonder what they want their legacies to be. Like, you know, Dr. King may have seen that his life was going to be short. I'm sure he was hoping it wouldn't be, but you know, this country has a way of reminding us that, yeah, that your life might be short if you're trying to make effective change. And then like when I see today's political leaders, especially Black ones, what do they want to leave behind? Like, I don't even see them working. I mean, well, I see who they're working hard for, but like, it's not going to go down as anything historical. So I just wonder what people today, our leaders today, want to be known for, because I'm afraid, like I get nervous that Martin Luther King might have been one of the last great leaders we had. And I'm not going to X out like Malcolm X and the people, the other people who played a role, the list of people who were in our past. I feel like that era of leadership may have been the time, like, when's the next moment? We don't have time. And yeah, and shout out to ADOS. I am also in ADOS New York, so I see some leaders, local leaders in the grassroots and activists there, even Felton. So like, not to discount the work you guys are doing, but just on the level of Martin Luther King.
Nah, that's you know, that's goals, as they say. Paul, do you have that thought gathered, or you need a moment? Because I can keep talking. If you got it, put it on the table.
No, it was a brief comment directly on what you were saying, and I'm not sure I can remember it. So let's just move on.
All right. If it comes back and we're still here, Romalita, you have your hand raised.
I do have my hand raised, and I wanted to address in the letter from a Birmingham jail. I lost my train of thought. He mentioned something about promises not being honored. I think it's in page I don't know where it is. I think it's maybe on the first page. And he said he's talking about there came an opportunity last September to talk with some of the leaders of the economic community. And I thought about some of these businesses back in 2020 when we had all of this unrest and people were putting up the Black squares and committing to support the Black community. And now we look and we see how they rolled back all of these DEI initiatives. And so they made these promises and now they're not being honored. And it's such a disappointment. And so when I was reading that, I said, this is just like today. This is exactly like what they're doing today. How could that be? How could that be all those years ago and still happening exactly as it were? It was as if he was speaking right now about what was happening to us now, that you made these promises and you've got a history of making promises to us and to people and to the country. I think back to the Native Americans and the treaties that they did not honor. And now here you are, 2025, and you said you were going to support us. And then just like that, you just take it away.
Yeah, broken promises, right? The country's built on them. The unique thing is, in my opinion, there's so much of an energy towards, again, that symbolism, that performatism, that continued exploitation of Black Americans in the forms that are the least valuable: media, entertainment, things that are meant to, I believe, continue to problematize our actual fight for repair. I'm going to read another quote from the letter, and I know we're winding down, and some of you may have to go, but this is a quick one. History is the long and tragic story of the fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture. But as Reinhold Niebuhr has reminded us, groups are more immoral than individuals. We wrestle with that in our political system right now with Citizens United and this idea that corporations are people too. It is so much easier, as I know from personal experience, as I know from observed experience, it is easier to be a bit more less caring of those affected by you when you are amongst the crowd, when you have joined in and postured amongst those, and you can be less of yourself. But when you wrestle with who you are in the mirror, that thing may be a little bit different. It might be harder to manage, but as he's stating in that part of the quote, if you're in a group, becomes a little easier to treat others malcontently. And that's why I play a video for my students, or I actually share with them the document, and then I have to play video because most of them don't read it. But it is concerning identity politics. Can we ever escape identity politics? These little pockets of collections of people who think that they're the priority, and they find some like-mindedness and forget that the collective is what is actually at stake. Ricky, you had something you want to add before we wind down? And I'm not rushing anyone. If you got time to hang with me, you got time to hang.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So Felton, I took this to heart, and I've been listening to what everybody's been saying, and my thoughts on how Dr. King was. I was 9 at the time, 8. Take that back. I was 8, still a young fellow, and the travesty of when that occurred, it hit my parents hard. When he was assassinated, and I can remember we had this old black and white television, and watching Walter Cronkite give the news, because at that time he was the man, because TV went off, 12 o'clock hit, there was no more TV, so you got that tone. But I can remember how distraught they were. They were sharecroppers at the time, and my father was transitioning into the mill, because they were tired of being not paid, ran off the land after they got the land to where it needed to be. So it was a lot of things that King was doing that really helped inspire them to move forward and become more self-sufficient for us as a family. And my father was a moderator for the Primitive Baptist Association in the long run. So, he had to endure a lot of things. And through the community, they looked at him, for support. I can remember, after that occurred, some of the negative things that came out, how it was pointed out, not only the generation that did not like him, or the whites that did not like him, the plight that he had within his own people that didn't support him like he needed to be supported, and, having to deal with the aftermath of, which I didn't learn until later on, about infidelities and things that he had in his own personal life. But in the long run, he was still a man. And that's what we had to remember too. As a man, he had to endure a lot of things that people do, but yet I think his integrity came out on top, because he had to work so hard presenting himself as nearly as being perfect, because of the way he was looked at. As he had to be perfect in the eyes of people in order to move forward, because as a Black man, we have to, work 10 times as hard at what we're trying to do to accomplish the goals. And I wouldn't have been able to accomplish some of the things that I was able to accomplish with the local county government here had not been for someone like him and the others that were fighting for those civil rights. So, seeing him as a leader, a mentor, because of the people that worked with him, he led them. And as a young man, to accomplish that much in such a short period of time, almost like Jesus, they had the same attitude towards trying to help people and make things better.
Well said, man. And yeah, I loved it with personalizing this Medgar, Malcolm, Martin, they're all young, relatively young men. I'm older than all of them right now. That's wild to me to know that the capabilities and the things that they prioritize, made them wise beyond their years. Man, and without, any consideration being overly given to their mortality. And I mean overly given because they knew the risks involved, and all of them were met with significant harm. I'm coming back to you, William, in just a second. Dr. Parker, thank you for joining us. I know some of you may drop off. I want to read one last quote that I think is timely. It speaks directly to that weight thing that I now say is complemented by whataboutism. For years now, I've heard the word weight. It rings in the ear of every Negro with a piercing familiarity. This weight has almost always meant never. It has been a tranquilizing thalidomide, that is a word about dentistry, a numbing agent, relieving the emotional stress for a moment, only to give birth to an ill-formed infant of frustration. I think that kind of puts us full circle until our present moment. We're still doing it. We're still refusing to really care for that infant, to really provide nurturing and care. And that's costing us something as a collective, as a nation. I'm coming to you, William. I'm gonna give you the last word unless somebody else has something they want to say before we get out of here. Go ahead, William.
All right. One thing I want to kind of leave people with is data. So when Felton just said, what is it costing us? So in America, this is the unique thing about ADOS and why right now ADOS is just stepped right in the shoes of King, because we are an organization that get the same heat that King got when he was alive. We are getting the same kind of heat because we in front of the curve. And reason we're in the front of the curve, we're looking at policies, we're looking at historical content, and we're looking at data. So when Felton say, what is it costing us? Right now, there's a study that was done in this country, and it said that America is costing America $17 trillion a year to discriminate against the descendants of slaves. $17 trillion just to discriminate on us. The next thing is the unique thing about data and historical content, it keeps you abreast of what you may think you understand, but you may be looking at it from a surface level. I heard DEI come up. So I don't know if people in the room understand, DEI is not new. It's older than me. It's been around since 1960. 1960. And during this time, DEI has mainly benefited white families, white men and white women. The African American or black male, we prefer to call them the American descendants of slave population, has only benefited, never being more than 3% of the beneficiary of DEI, even though they make us the face of it. So the reason this data becomes so important, because a lot of times without understanding the historical content, the policy itself, and who is the beneficiary of it, you could actually be fighting in the wrong direction. So I challenge people to start, if you have a bias, if that bias don't align with historical content, data, policies, the effect of those policies. It may be a bias that's controlling you mentally. My quest for people is when Phil talking about that mirror, that you would look in that mirror and say, can I go find data to support whatever my ideology is? And should I move in the direction of the data? Because the data is out there. It's all over the place. You got to go research it and study it. You can go to our website, the ADOSadvocacyfoundation.org, and we assess a lot of data on things that people don't think about and how they are connected. So I'll land there.
Man, grateful. I'm glad that I have so many people that are thoughtful and insightful and willing to take notes as Rob is doing and write something down and maybe go check something out yourself later, because it is right there and it does a body good. Knowledge ain't never hurt nobody. It's definitely been some hurt on the pursuit of knowledge, but it's not hurt anybody once it's acquired. It's there to make us all better. I wanted to say lastly, just a couple of things that I think are important to share. There is another work that does some of what William was alluding to by Heather McGee. The book is titled The Sum of Us. I think the subtitle was What Racism Has Cost Us. She talks about the economic issues centering around a commitment to a racialized and segregated society. So I think that's important for us to kind of unpack if we can. But Heather McGee's The Sum of Us is that work that does that. Yeah, I'm grateful that you guys are as interested as you are in the things that need to be, I think, discussed and unpacked further for the benefit of our society as a whole. There are plenty of places you can go and explore and look and find out more about these things, and I think it is all for our betterment. Last night, I had the opportunity to engage with Dr. Parker, where he's talking about Black families and this search that was being had during and after, and by his research, he mentioned up until the 1920s, for Black family members to find their loved ones who were sold elsewhere during the institution of slavery. We gotta be more honest about how we do this. Paul, thanks for joining. Take care. Look forward to getting with you in the future. Paul's going to do something for RELC coming down the line, and I think you guys will value that as well. So yeah, I don't have much more to say. I'm people stuck around after one, and I'm glad you did. I think it's all, it's like putting a little water and on a plant and watching it grow some, and I'm glad to be a part of that process. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, you can email me, follow up when you need to, if you want to, and we'll circle back to these things and others, I'm certain, because this goes on, but I don't think it should be perpetual. I'm not one of those people that say we got to keep working and fighting. No, we want to reach the point where we have other work and other fights to do. Let's solve, let's fix, because there'll be something else to do, but it doesn't always have to be the same thing. Thanks, Latasha, for the compliment. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm grateful to be here and glad to have shared the time. Y'all take care.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Felton.
All right.